How can we redeem this? Well, can Christians redeem Halloween for Christ's glory? Well, just because it's been of pagan origin doesn't mean that it needs to be altogether rejected. Now, all of us start as sinners and God has redeemed us. There are things we see throughout Scripture and other things we see around us that have not necessarily come from a great origin to start with, but they've been redeemed. They've been made where they're things that we can easily participate in. All of us start as sinners and are redeemed through Jesus Christ. And so God redeems us and others as well, but not in the sense of salvation. I'm not talking about that part of redemption in that sense, but the Bible's full of stories of God's redemption of people and things. So just because something had an ungodly origin doesn't mean that it needs to be necessarily ungodly forever and ever. For instance, I don't know if some of you might be driving or have a Volkswagen. Well, a Volkswagen, whether you know this or not, the Volkswagen Beetle was the brainchild of Adolf Hitler, the Nazi leader. Nobody's going to step back and say to you, wow, what a great origin. No, you should never drive a VW because of the origin of that. The reality is society and culture has come to the point of that's not really connected to its origin anymore. It's accepted as a good quality vehicle. It's well made, et cetera, and there's a long list of things you could say. But nobody will say that it was unredeemable. No one should actually use a VW because of that. And that's one way to look at Halloween. Halloween in our culture no longer means what it used to mean, what it might have meant decades or even centuries ago. A lot of Christians think that because the origins were pagan, we shouldn't connect to it at all now. But if we do that, then we're going to rule out a lot of things. For instance, any of you have a birthday? You ever celebrate birthday? We always try to make a big deal of birthdays in our household, much to my wife's chagrin, because she didn't like celebrating a birthday. Our birthdays are just 2 days apart, so we'd usually do something kind of in the middle. But we always made a big deal of it with our two boys. Wanted to celebrate, would have parties and play games and go places and do things and, just make a big deal out of birthdays. Well, the reality is that's not a biblical concept. There's only two places in Scripture that we see anything to do with birthdays at all. One is in the Old Testament for King Pharaoh, and the other is in the New Testament for King Herod. And I think we would all agree that neither one of those would be considered someone that we'd want to hold a candle up to and say, hey, look, this is a valuable person to mimic, to use as a moral character. Both of them were just horrible, hideous individuals. So we don't have a biblical basis to say, hey, look, celebrate a birthday or don't celebrate a birthday. In fact, that's the same with Halloween. There's no biblical criteria that tells us what we should do as far as Halloween goes. Same thing with Christmas. Much of Christmas originated as a pagan event in the beginning. And there were everything like from the Christmas tree to celebrating the Yule log. And, even the time of Christmas was probably not the actual time of Jesus' birth, but it worked conveniently with the calendar of the day. And that's when it became the time we celebrate that birthday. Same thing with Easter. Easter originally was a pagan holiday and it got merged together. And you have to stop and think, Easter eggs and Easter bunnies. I'm not sure those are holy at all, but many of us have played with our kids and done Easter egg hunting and all those kind of things. But the origin came originally from a pagan source originally. So over many years, it's come to focus on the resurrection. And even now, we want to focus on the resurrection. So when we think about that, we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of guilt by association. We make ourselves guilty by associating with something from a long ago past. And things change. Some things get worse and worse, as we know, but some things change for the better. So if you want to redeem this, find ways that you can redeem this, cultural holiday that makes it fun. The intent is fun. When our kids were growing up, we loved dressing them up. We didn't dress them up like spooks and goblins. You don't have to do that. In fact, my youngest son, one year, he was big into computers and robots and all that kind of thing, and he made himself a costume of a robot using boxes and piping, like the piping comes out the back of your dryer in your house and that kind of, I mean, it was great. Some of the best pictures we ever had of our kids in Halloween. But, that was a fun thing. They enjoyed that. They enjoyed getting ready for it. They enjoyed going out and getting a haul of candy, and that kind of thing. And so those are things that are positive. Even churches can celebrate in such a way, doing a trick or treat or doing some kind of a harvest festival or something else, where you use the opportunity for connecting with your community, building relationship with your community, even sharing the gospel. I always talk about using shotgun witnesses when we do special evangelistic events of some sort. And you can do a trunk or treat or some type of a harvest festival and have shotgun witnesses who their role in the activity, somebody from your church, is nothing but to dialogue and visit with parents and try to open that door to be able to share the gospel with them, provide gospel materials, gospel tracts, things of that sort. We always did that from our house. As kids come through the neighborhood, we would put together a little sandwich bag, and we'd put 3, 4, 5 pieces of candy in it. So they got a good stash of candy from us. And then just one little evangelistic tract that was usually a kind of a cartoon tract of some sort. And every kid got one of those. End of the night, if we had extras, we'd spread them around and give 2 or 3 to a kid. But the reality is we can find ways to redeem this holiday in those ways. Now, just because the beginning was bad doesn't mean we have to keep associating with it, as I already said. Oh, I didn't mention the days of the week, and we've gone too long already, but the days of the week's another thing. Originally, the days were named after like the moon god, okay, the sun god, Sunday, Monday, and so we would have to stop practicing the days of the week basically.